Yeah, that's right. Dr. P.H. Martins has a second watercolor ink. Why? I don't know. Let's go ahead and find out. What's up YouTube, I'm J-Rod of BATTLEBrawlerproductions, and today we're taking a look at the Dr. P.H. Martins Radiant Concentrated Watercolor Ink 14A Black. Really curious to see the shot as we're continuing our look through the Dr. P.H. Martins ink catalog to figure out which ink is the best out of all of them. And I'm really curious because we actually did take a look at the Dr. P.H. Martins Hydrus ink in the past. I actually really like this. I thought this was a good watercolor ink, and I'm really curious to see what the differences between the two are, as this sells for $9.99 all the way up to $12.99 depending on where you go for half a fluid ounce, and this one sells for $9.99 to $15.99 for one full fluid ounce. So I'm really curious to see what the difference is. The only thing I can tell is that on the side, this one advertises that it actually works for airbrushes, technical pens, and for brushes. So really kind of curious to see what they're going to do with this. You know, this is a very different design from the other inkwells we've seen. It is literally half the size. It's in the square, so we get half the ink. So I'm really curious to see how this is actually going to work out and how it's going to be differently to the actual Hydrus ink. So with all that said, let's go ahead and break out a sketchbook and take a closer look at it. Alright, first dip, and I actually quite like that. For one, it's very, very liquidy. I could really get that feel for it when I was actually filling my little inkwell. And to me, that liquidness is going to cause two problems. I know I just made up the word liquidness, but we're going to roll with it. For one, to me, it could easily be a thing where it's too liquidy, so when you go to do an even coat, you're going to get areas of streaking because it's being pushed aside. You're going to get one spot that's lighter than the other. That could be a potential problem. And to me, it kind of feels more like a normal ink, but instead of being waterproof, it's just not waterproof. So it says concentrated watercolor, but to me, so far, it doesn't feel like watercolor ink. There is a difference. Either way, it's very smooth, it's very liquidy. Let's go ahead and do our quill nib test. And nothing. There we go. Yeah, same thing. Just feels very liquidy, has a good flow, has a good little nice rhythm to it. I like it, but we're really going to be able to tell during our actual brush test. That's really going to make or break this actual kind of suspicion I have. So let's go ahead and give it a dip. Yep, look at that. That is very liquidy, and there you go. There are the streak problems. See? It's getting a purple coloring, if you notice. On camera, it's more gray, but in person, it's purple. And that usually happens when you have a non-waterproof ink. A great example to me is not the Winsor & Newton waterproof ink. That actually is a really good waterproof ink, but the Higgins non-waterproof ink, where it did this purple discoloration. That was kind of distracting because it felt almost like a colored ink instead of an actual ink that would give you a normal, natural gray wash. You can see that here, we're really able to go in and spread this out, and it actually will have less of the pigment in here. Now, I know watercolors tend to have very strong pigments and some tend to have very weak pigments, but the thing is that for the most part you're going to get like a discoloration method to it. You're actually going to be able to go in and just get a lighter tone, but here we're getting a purple tone. It's just kind of weird to me. I don't know how I feel about that. We did spread it out though, and it does seem to be a bit of a lighter purple instead of the actual solid black gray, so I'm a little disappointed. I would have heard that solid black like right there, but let's go ahead and actually add some water into this and check out its actual watercolor nature. Because it's more liquidy, I'm going to assume that it's going to spread it out more and it's going to be as less concentrated with the actual line art. Because one thing I can say about the Hydrus ink is that it actually had some pretty good line art, where the line art actually survived for a little bit longer than it normally would have. So let's see if that is the case here. Just going to wet with just water, no ink. Yeah. Purple this color. I'm sorry. It takes me out of the illustration when we get this weird purple instead of a gray. It just seems kind of weird to me. Maybe it's because it's more concentrated, but wouldn't it be like a stronger black pigment and they wouldn't mix a purple? I don't know. I think it's a little weird. I do like the feel of it though. I feel like we have good layers. Like we're able to really get a good amount of layers and control, and we can really go in and thin things out. So that's kind of interesting. I do kind of like what we're getting here. But either way, this is an interesting experience. And again, we're just going to wet our brush. We're not actually going to add ink to it. So we got some water, and let's go ahead and run it through here. And yep, as you can see, we're able to pick up that pigment and push it. But again, it feels more like a non-waterproof India ink than an actual like watercolor ink. The two inks feel very differently, and so far I actually really like the Hydrus ink more than I do like this. I mean, I think we'll be able to get some interesting layering abilities, but it's distractingly purple in a weird way when this is supposed to be black. So to me, it's a little interesting, and I'm not sure how I really feel about it fully, because I think it's really distracting we're getting this purple. But either way, I think this is going to work well with our illustration we have planned. Let's go ahead ahead and talk about that right now. So today's illustration is something a little special, as we're actually going to be illustrating a new character I had an idea for. I name him Graveyard Man. There's a few little things I want to work on before I do the full story reveal with him like I've done with Wrath, but I think you guys will like this illustration. Now, the last time we took a look at a Dr. P.H. Barnes watercolor ink, I made the foolish decision to use a Dr. P.H. Barnes ink to do the line art, and I won't be doing that. I will instead be using my traditional Winsor & Newton ink, which is my favorite ink of all time that I heavily recommend to all people trying to get into inking, because I know it's waterproof and I know we'll be able to go in with some awesome watercolor effects. So with all that said, let's go ahead and roll that super time lapse. Making this piece was super fun and honestly not that challenging. It was really straightforward. I just did my line art with my Winsor & Newton, and then after I gave that plenty of time to dry, I went in and did my watercolor effects, and I really liked it. The only real complaint I had was the background. I didn't feel like it was really strong or anything that was too kind of in depth and really kind of stood out. It's just kind of a simple little wash, but I ended up just making it kind of look at this cool mist emitting from Graveyard Man, and then I went in with a cool little black lightning bolt, just kind of doing something different. I felt like that would have been really cool. And then after I did everything, I just kind of thought through the piece where I knew the character had translucent energy body, and I would just go in from there and then make sure that the parts that overlap would have a thicker, heavier shadow, and I just kind of did that throughout the whole piece. It was really fun and straightforward, and I really did enjoy this entire process. It did take a little longer than normal because I had to take a few breaks here and there to take care of my dog Coco, who is incredibly tiny, adorable, but man is she very distracting when it comes to making videos. Overall, I am really happy with how the piece came out. There is one thing that did kind of bug me, but I'm ultimately happy that it exists. Remember how when we did our test, I complained how the ink had a weird purple discoloring, but when the ink actually dried, that purple color disappeared, and it was actually a nice even gray tone. I really like the fact that it's not a purple discoloring, but it shouldn't even have that purple discoloring. It should just be gray, like the other Dr. P.H. Martin watercolor ink we took a look at. So while I am glad that it didn't stay that purple, I just wish that it never turned that purple. So that's really my biggest complaint with this, and the fact that because it is more liquidy, you're not going to get an even solid black tone. So that's why there's no heavy blacks with this actual ink, and instead all the blacks are reserved for the Winsor & Newton, which really did help make this piece just cleaner than the previous one we did, because that one had a lot of bleeding issues. So going forward, we're just going to stick with the Winsor & Newton ink for our actual line art. But with all that said, let's go ahead and take a look at the piece in all its finished glory. And we're done, and guys, I do love how this piece came out. While I personally don't think it's in my top 10 best work, it's something that I think is really cool, very unique among the other pieces I've done, and definitely stands out in my portfolio. I really do like working with some different watercolor techniques, and it's something that I really do want to pursue more and just get better at, so we're definitely going to revisit some other watercolors and watercolor inks going forward. But if you guys like this piece, it is available on my ArtStation account for a $1 digital download. There's that first link in the description down below, and it really does help the channel out. But putting the piece to the side, let's go ahead and talk about the actual ink itself. I have to say that I actually liked it a lot more than I thought I would, and on top of that, it actually is very different from the other ones. So I was really worried that these would be the exact same with small differences, and they do have quite a bit of difference between them. For one, I have to say that the Dr. P.H. Barnes Hydrus ink is a little more higher quality. It is actually a little bit of a thicker ink, so you're able to go in and get a smoother tone, and the fact that it stays its consistent coloring and doesn't discolor is a huge bonus for me. However, the Dr. P.H. Barnes Radiant watercolor is far more liquidy, meaning that if you need to actually use it with, let's say, an airbrush or technical pen, that's probably going to work out better. On top of that, that actual color difference that I was talking about, how it turns that weird shade of purple, is distracting, but it does actually dry normal gray, so I do like the fact that it returns to its actual proper tones. It's just a little annoying. Overall, I can't recommend this one over the Hydrus one. I think the Hydrus one is just higher quality. I think it's better, and on top of that, I do like the fact that these things both sell for $9.99, again, depending on where you go, and you actually get one full fluid ounce with this, and you get half a fluid ounce with this. So I definitely don't think this is a bad ink at all. I think the Radiant watercolor ink is pretty good, but honestly not the best watercolor that Winsor & Newton makes. I think you're just going to get more bang for your buck with this one here. And honestly, I'm going to rate this a 6 on my scale of 1 to 10. While I do think it's above average, I think comparing it to its competitor, it just doesn't hold a candle. So definitely go for the Hydrus one if you're looking for a good, solid watercolor ink. But that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your guys' in the comment section down below. What do you guys think of the Dr. P.H. Barnes Radiant Concentrated Water ink? Do you think that it's actually a really good one? Do you actually think it's better than the Hydrus ink? I'd love to hear your guys' comments in the comment section down below, along with what you guys think of the piece, areas that I could improve on, and areas you like. Always love to hear your feedback because it makes me a better artist. Subscribe to the channel for more art animation content. You can also leave a comment on the next ink you want me to take a look at, either another Dr. P.H. Barnes ink, another Winsor & Newton ink. I'm always up for trying out new inks and experimenting with the craft of art and inking. So with all that said, I'm J-Rod of BLACKEST. I draw power and my own soul.